see everyone. I'm really excited for you all to meet Doug today. And thank you, Doug, for graciously giving us your time to talk about the work that's being done to combat the opioid crisis here in Maine. You are such a passionate speaker. I won't even attempt to tell your story. So take it away, Doug.
Well, thank you, Karen and Charlie and everyone for being here this morning. You know, I have to tell you that I spoke not long ago to the Bangor Noontime Rotary. And so when I thought about speaking to the Farmington Rotary, I thought, well, how many people are going to be there? There'll be a handful, because the Bangor Noontime Rotary, there were about 15 people, which I thought was fine. But I see that there were like 28 of you or something like that. So I'm very impressed. I do have to add that Bangor has I think has a morning and a noontime Rotary, but nonetheless, I'm impressed by the number of people here this morning, and thank you for the chance to take a few minutes of your time. I work with Karen, and she's terrific, as you all know, and so we work together in Maine's workforce development system. We try to help people ultimately end up with meaningful, decent employment. And for many people, that includes education or training along the way. Not for everybody, but for many. And I'll just briefly tell you how I came to this work, because I want you to know how passionate I am. And secondly, I think it's important for people to hear stories like the one I'm about to tell you. So I grew up in Bangor, and I always wanted to help people. I had parents who were very active. My mother was always collecting for some charitable fund or doing something at our church, and so on. And we always watched the news. And so I was interested in government and politics and wanted to help people. But the person I could never help in my life was me. I grew up with two mental illnesses that I told no one about, not my parents, not my two sisters. We had a very close, sort of lower middle class family in Bangor. And I couldn't tell anyone, not my friends or eventually my coworkers for sure, that I suffered from obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety disorder. And I just will give you a couple of examples of what each day was like for me. Just to get out of bed in the morning, it sometimes took me 5, 10, 15 attempts. I'd get up, it wouldn't feel right. I'd get back into bed, I'd roll over a couple of times or 3 or 4 times, whatever number felt right to me that day, and I'd try again. And then eventually when I got out of bed, I'd go into the bathroom and I might wash my hair again, 5, 10, 15 times over and over again until it felt right. OCD is a fascinating illness unless you suffer from it. I somehow, though, managed to graduate from high school, college, even got a master's degree, and I have no idea how I did that, because I read very, very little and took terrible notes in school. Reading and writing were also tormenting. I'd read the first page in a book or an assignment, and then I'd read it over and over and over again until it felt right. And then finally, I'd turn to page 2, and I'd think, no, I have to go back and read page 1 again. But somehow I managed and got through school. I grew up in the Bangor area around the Baldacci family. And so eventually I went into government. And I just managed with routines and rituals and prayers that I said to get through each day until September 11th, 2001, when the terrorist attacks occurred. I'm sure you all remember where you were. I was on Capitol Hill, right next to that big domed building where we thought one of the planes would be heading. We could already see the smoke billowing up from the Pentagon over in Arlington, Virginia. And that day, my OCD and anxiety went completely out of control. I literally could not take a step without feeling like I needed to step back and do it again. Literally a step. And then the very next night, September 12th, I went out to dinner, my favorite little restaurant in Washington, D.C., with a coworker. and we drank a lot of wine. And I was not much of a drinker, but I realized, if not that night, then really shortly afterward, that I needed this, that alcohol would be my medicine. And it was very good medicine for a while. I was not much of a drinker, never kept it in my apartment in Washington until then. So I didn't need to drink a lot to have my symptoms calmed. But as time went on, I moved back to Maine to be John Baldacci's first press secretary in the governor's office. And then I went on to be Maine's, the title is Chief Deputy Secretary of State. And then I went on to do other things. So all this time, still no one knows about my mental illnesses, that I've been self-medicating, that I became an alcoholic. And then no one found out about my first 5 arrests, mostly for OUI. I couldn't stop drinking and driving for 2 reasons. 1, I couldn't stop drinking because I was a terrible alcoholic. And 2, I couldn't stop driving because I didn't want anyone to know that there were any problems in my life. I kept those first 5 arrests a total secret. I was excellent at bailing myself out of jail, making up a story as to why I didn't come home for a night, and getting my car out of the impound lot and continuing to drive so no one would know there was a problem. Finally, on October 23rd, 2017, about 3.5 years ago, it all came crumbling down, fortunately. On my 6th arrest, I went to jail for 4.5 months. I resigned my deputy commissioner job at a Department of State government to go to jail. I left jail on March 4th, 2018 to spend 15 months in the Penobscot County Adult Drug Treatment Court, drug court. There are 6 of them in Maine. One's in Penobscot County. There should be one in every county. And toward the end of my time in drug court, and fortunately they're renaming all the courts treatment and recovery courts and taking the word drug out, because treatment and recovery is the focus of these courts. But toward the end of my time in the treatment court, my good friend Lee Humphrey had become the president and CEO of Eastern Maine Development Corporation, where I work today. Lee and I worked together many years ago in the governor's office. And Lee knew about my new passion for helping people in recovery and reentry situations. And he said, you know, Doug, we have this workforce development division where we help people who have had all kinds of challenges in their life. And he said, we're hiring. And if you come to work for us, we'll do more outreach and provide more services to people in recovery, people in jails and prisons, and those reentering from jails and prisons. So I said, sign me up. First of all, I have 2 felonies now, and it's really hard to get a job when you have a felony, regardless of what you've done since those went on your record. And by the way, people with a criminal record, they carry it around like a ball and chain, regardless of what they've done in their life since then. Too many employers still to this day have blanket policies that say, you know, if you check off that box that says you have a criminal record, we're not even going to consider you. And that's wrong, and we need to change that. So I went to work 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, for Eastern Maine Development Corporation in the Workforce Development Division. And one of my first assignments was to help write a grant proposal on behalf of the state of Maine, the Maine Department of Labor, and EMDC to seek several million more dollars to do this kind of work. And we received the money about a year ago when COVID arrived, and it slowed down the implementation somewhat, but we're fully up and running and have been for a number of months. And this extra money is to fund a program that I named Connecting with Opportunities. And it's called Connecting with Opportunities because when I was in jail, I kept thinking, who on earth is connecting these guys with the resources and the services they so desperately need? I don't know if you know much about who's in our jails. I didn't. Frankly, I didn't pay much attention, and most people do not. People in jail are by and large poor, and sick. You don't find the healthy and the wealthy in our jails because they bail themselves out and they go home. The poor, and typically the sick, aren't able to do that. So they languish in our jails for weeks or months. And there are three things we know about what happens to people who are ill while they're in our jails. They stay longer than people who don't have a mental illness. Their conditions worsen. And they're more likely to be the victim of abuse while they're in our jails. And typically they can't go home because they're poor. I was in jail with a young man named Chad. Chad suffered from mental illness. It was obvious. Chad lived in the woods outside of Newport, and he loved living in the woods. He was in jail with me because he had shoplifted, allegedly, probably did, an energy drink from a Shaw's department grocery store. He was there for 3 months because he didn't have $160 to bail himself out of jail. All he wanted to do was to go back to the woods in Newport. He was there for 3 months in Penobscot County Jail, where on average it costs $109 a night to house someone. After 3 months, he finally had his court date. And of course, he was let go on time served. And Chad was given an order to reimburse Shaw's the $3.89 for the energy drink. And he was ordered to do that in the form of a money order. And I said to Chad, "Do you know what a money order is?" And of course, he had no idea. Anyway, that's just a sample of some of the issues that I find abhorrent about our criminal legal system that I no longer call our criminal justice system, because there's so little justice for so many parties in the system, including the victims of crime. So little justice. And but the reason I'm telling you that story is because when I was in jail, I kept thinking about people like Chad. Who is helping? Who is connecting these individuals with the resources that they so desperately need? I wasn't surrounded by people who were evil. I was surrounded by people like me who needed help of one kind or another. I was fortunate to sort of be, able to get the care that I needed. And today I finally see someone for my mental health issues, and I take a couple of medicines for OCD and anxiety, and they work well. But most people that I was with in jail just didn't have that kind of capacity. So I named this project Connecting with Opportunities. And we have several million more dollars now to do this outreach, to help people who have been impacted by opiate use disorder, whether directly or indirectly, or not at all. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. To connect them with education, training, ultimately employment, and to help them with a lot of supportive services that really make a difference. And I'm going to go through a very, very brief PowerPoint. Some of you are thinking, oh no, not another PowerPoint, but this one's very, very short, and it'll explain more about what we're doing. And I'm just trying to get this so I can show it in a PowerPoint. Whoop, I'm getting smaller here. That's not what I want to do. This is what I want to do. Okay, so I'm glad we had the poem this morning about hope, because that's what this is all about. Maine's Connecting with Opportunities initiative, we're trying to bring hope and new beginnings to individuals impacted by opioid use disorder, and to others who want to make a difference in the ongoing crisis, even if they haven't been impacted. And Um, as you probably know, it's hard to escape the news that, whoops, let me go back. Maine has been profoundly impacted by the opioid crisis, and it's getting worse, not better. Because of COVID, it's really out of control. We had hoped that in 2018, we had sort of turned a corner. Overdose deaths dropped a bit for the first time. They ticked up a little in 2019, but then last year with COVID, the numbers really skyrocketed. More than 500 people died last year because of an overdose death, almost always involving an opioid. And this year, we're off to an even worse start. The numbers in January and February, if they were to continue, I don't think we have March figures yet. But if the numbers for January and February were to continue, we'd be well over 600 people this year. And so the need is tremendous and urgent. So I'll just tell you briefly who's eligible for this Connecting with Opportunities initiative. Because of the way it's funded from the U.S. Department of Labor, we are focused on people who are unemployed. But I always tell folks, even if you know someone who you think might benefit from Connecting with Opportunities and you think they might be employed, still point them in our direction, because if they're not eligible for this initiative, Connecting with Opportunities, they might well be eligible for another of the workforce development programs that Karen and I and others help to administer. There are several programs available throughout Maine, but this one is for people who are dislocated or long-term unemployed. And I won't get into that, but if someone's unemployed and they want help moving forward, please point them in our direction. It's well worth their time to have a 15-minute conversation. So there are two tracks on this Connecting with Opportunities initiative. The first one is for people who have been impacted, either directly or indirectly. In my case, for example, I could say I've been indirectly impacted because I have a nephew who struggled with opioids for about a dozen years. He's finally into recovery. He's starting college next month with help from this program, Connecting with Opportunities. He's starting next month to go into a substance use disorder counseling program at a college in Bangor. And again, he's benefiting from this Connecting with Opportunities initiative to do that. But I could say I've been indirectly impacted because his problems, his challenges, his illness impacted our family so much. So I've been indirectly impacted. So I would be considered, if I was eligible, otherwise, I'd be on track one. And that would open up a wide range of employment opportunities for me. Basically, if there are jobs in a particular field that I would want to go into, EMDC can be supportive. Now, if you've not been impacted at all, either personally or indirectly, but you want to go into a field that we hope will reduce or diminish or mitigate the crisis, we can still help you if you're otherwise eligible. You're not impacted, but you want to go into a field like mental health treatment, substance use disorder counseling, maybe some sort of a field in prevention. Maybe you want to be a certified intentional peer support specialist and use that credential, or a recovery coach. Even if you haven't been impacted, come and see us and maybe we can help you. And this is what we do with each participant. Everyone gets an individualized plan and everyone gets a case manager, if you will. We call them a workforce development specialist to help with the planning of the plan and helping each step of the way along that person's journey. But we also have a peer. We call them peer connectors because it's the Connecting with Opportunities initiative, a peer connector who also partners with each participant to help them along the way. So everyone gets a mini team behind them. And then we have funds. It might be to pay for a short-term training program or a longer-term training program, or maybe that person wants to go to college like my nephew, and we can help that person fully or help them to get well on their way. And then we can use our resources for people who may not want to go to school, or in addition to what we're doing to help them to go to school, with work experiences and on-the-job trainings. And these are important because they help to open the door to an employer that might not otherwise open. I'll give you an example. We might go to an employer who's hiring and say, we've got this guy named Doug. We think he would be a good fit for what you do. He's interested in what you do. He's got good skills. We know you're hiring. We want to be helpful to you. But we know you're going to be reluctant because Doug has a criminal background. So this is what we're going to do. Take Doug on for, say, 4 months. And we, EMDC, we're going to pay for half of his salary. And we're going to be with him behind the scenes every step of the way. So if something goes wrong, say Doug's car breaks down and he needs that repaired so he can get to work, we're going to repair his car. Well, we're not personally going to repair his car, but we're going to cover the cost of that. And maybe he needs some extra help with childcare until he starts getting his paychecks. We're going to help pay for his childcare so that he gets to work. And then at the end of those 4 months, we hope it works out well for you and for Doug, and he stays on as an employee. Again, this is a way we can use our resources to help open doors for our participants that might not otherwise open. And on this list, you see various supportive services, and that's critical. That, along with the peer support, really makes the difference for this Connecting with Opportunities initiative. We don't want our participants to start school or to start working with us, looking for meaningful employment, and then have a roadblock derail them or sidetrack them. No, we want to help. So we help with transportation and childcare, maybe an emergency housing situation we can help with. Technology, does someone need a computer to go to school and use? We want to help with that. Does someone need new clothing for an academic program or to go on job interviews? We want to help with that. This is important. Does someone need new dentures? One of the first questions I wanted to ask when I was in jail, when I dared to talk to people, why are all these young men missing teeth? I thought they had all been in fights and hadn't done particularly well. And that might have been the case for some. But I quickly learned that because many of these young men grew up in a different situation than I did. They grew up in poverty, or they grew up with parents who didn't have the wherewithal to help them to get proper dental care, or they used substances that caused their teeth to fall out in their 20s and 30s. So I was so pleased to learn that not only Connecting with Opportunities, but other of our workforce development programs can help people get new teeth if that's what's holding them back. And it holds so many young people back. So that's, again, one of our services that we can help people to access if that's what they need to move forward with their education, training, and employment. And so I spend a lot of my time talking to people like you, reaching out to various organizations and agencies and individuals, nonprofits, the whole list here, because we need partnerships to make this work. We need your help to raise awareness about the workforce development system in general, which too few people know about, to make referrals, and I'll tell you how you can do that. We have these peer connector positions, as I said, and we had hoped to have them visiting lots of organizations, but because of COVID, that hasn't been possible. But there are lots of things we hope you might do. And it's very simple to connect with us. We've made this simple because for far too long, people like me in government made accessing services really difficult. So we try to make our services very easy to access. There isn't even an application to fill out. The easiest way for people to learn more about what we're doing is to refer themselves or have someone else refer them to Opportunity Grant, all one word, Opportunity Grant at emdc.org. You can certainly contact me as well, particularly if you know of an organization or an individual who you would like me to try to personally assist. But otherwise, Opportunity Grant at emdc.org, and we'll reach out to that person. And all the individual has to write is, hey, I hear you have programs that help people. Tell me all about it. Or refer somebody else and write, I've copied my friend Mary on this email. Tell Mary what you do. And we'll reach out to Mary and we'll take it from there. We're making this really, really simple. And we'll meet with that person. We'll explain what we do. We'll determine eligibility, and then we'll get going. And we'll do our very best to build a plan based on that person's interests and skills and where they want to go in life. And we'll build that plan with them. We're not going to dictate what people study or what kind of work they go into. As long as there are jobs in that particular field, generally we can be helpful. And so I'm going to stop the slideshow if I can. Oh, I just wanted to say also that this is a statewide effort. Eastern Maine Development Corporation, in the middle of the screen, we cover 9 counties as the service provider. We wrote the grant for the state, but as a service provider, we cover 9 of the counties, including your part of the state. If you happen to know someone along the coast, in what we call the coastal counties, Waldo down to York, that's Waldo, Knox, Lincoln, Saginaw, Cumberland, and York, there's an organization like EMDC. It's called Workforce Solutions. It's part of Goodwill Industries, the Goodwill stores, and they provide the services along the coast. And then finally, Aroostook County Action Program, ACAP, handles Aroostook County. But again, it's a statewide program. So if you know someone elsewhere in Maine, even if you direct them to us at Opportunity Grant at emdc.org, and they live in one of these other counties that we don't serve, we'll get them in touch with the right people. And so thank you for listening to that and watching the slideshow, and I'm going to stop sharing. And I know I've left things out, and certainly Karen can speak up, but what I want to leave you with are just 2 or 3 brief things. Number one, if you remember nothing else, remember we have money. You don't hear that often. We have plentiful resources in this Connecting with Opportunities initiative. Number 2, don't worry whether you think someone's eligible for this particular initiative or not, because if you know anyone, it could be someone in your home, it could be your neighbor, your neighbor's child, your niece, anyone who's unemployed or working but earning little and wants some help to try to move forward with what they want to do, with where they want to go, it's well worth their time to have a 15-minute conversation with someone like me or Karen. Well worth their time. We might be able to help them a little, or we might be able to change their life almost entirely. I know it happens because I see it happen. And if we can't help them, we might know of another resource that can. So I'll stop rambling. Thank you for your time. And I'll be happy to answer questions. I see that Frank has a question.
Yeah, very interesting talk. And I am deeply disturbed by the story about Chad, because there are multiple safeguards. I mean, for something like that to happen to Chad, there had to be, I counted it, probably 5 major mistakes. I mean, first of all, for that offense, he should have been summoned and not arrested. I can't imagine somebody being arrested for an energy drink. That's a Class E misdemeanor. Secondly,
yep,
the bail clerk would have had to mess up royally he should have gotten a personal recognizance bond. I mean, if he was by some weird fluke actually arrested and not summoned, he would have been PR bonded by the bail clerk. Third, the minute the court opened up Monday morning, they get a list of people who are being held, and the court clerk should have monitored it and gotten this guy in front of a judge immediately. And there's no way a judge could possibly authorize somebody being held for that offense. Fourth, you can't be held in jail without a court-appointed attorney. And how could the court-appointed attorney possibly not get him out? Because this is not even a jailable offense. It's a Class E misdemeanor. It's probably a deferred disposition.
Yeah.
I mean, if he had a court-appointed attorney and they let
Right.
this guy there for 3.5 months on an offense that was not even jailable to start with,
Yep.
I mean, that's horrific. I mean, he should sue. That would be the most flagrant case of malpractice I've seen in a long time.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and even though I was in government for 30 years, I thought I knew a thing or two about the criminal legal system, and I didn't until I went to jail. And then, as soon as I got out on March 4th, I began studying this stuff almost on a daily basis. And I'm guessing you're an attorney, but and so I began studying these things. Now, and we don't have to spend much time on this, but I'm glad you.
I don't usually pick up for the justice.
No, but I'm glad you brought this up because I think it's helpful, and I really want people to know more about these sorts of situations. Now, Chad had a criminal history. He was charged and convicted of stealing a vehicle at one time. Chad wasn't trying to steal the vehicle. I understand. I know. Chad wasn't convicted of. There was a news story when I got out and I found out, oh, he stole a vehicle. I went to the news story and Chad was found sitting in someone's vehicle. And when asked why he did it, he said, I liked the color of it. And that's Chad. Chad wasn't trying to steal the vehicle, I'm almost certain. But Chad, because of his limitations, he was charged with stealing a vehicle. So Chad had a long criminal record. What I want to tell you about, the only thing I want to tell you about is how we layer punishment upon punishment upon punishment on the poor. We have, unlike the 49 other states, as Frank knows, we don't have a public defender system. And that might be good, frankly. I'm not here to give an opinion on that. We have something called the Indigent Legal Services System. And if you Google our Indigent Legal Services System, you'll see that in many people's opinions, it's not highly regarded. We pay our attorneys, I think it's still $60 an hour to take on these cases. $60 an hour in my government world and now the nonprofit world would be incredible. But for a lot of attorneys, $60 an hour isn't a lot. Now, there are good attorneys in our criminal legal system, in our indigent legal services system, and then there are some lousy ones. And I've got to tell you, even the good ones, they don't take your calls from the jail, most of them. When I was in jail, particularly for the people around me who I could tell were both poor, charged with minor offenses, I would think, well, why don't you call your lawyer? And they would say, Doug, my lawyer won't take my call. And so then I said to some of the staff in the first jail I was in, Penobscot County Jail, how do these folks connect with their lawyer? Well, they're supposed to write to them. You can't work on your criminal case inside a cage when you can't write very well. And then you send off the letter and then you wait and you hope and you pray. And most people see that attorney about 5 minutes before they go into the courtroom. And in Chad's case, I was with him one of the times he went to court. He went to see his attorney. He came back to the holding cell where I and several other people were waiting for our time in court. I said, Chad, what did your attorney say to you? And Chad said, he told me to shut up. And I'm almost certain Chad probably told a fanciful story, and Chad wanted to, to share whatever was on his mind. He told me to shut up. And so many people stay in jail because they can't afford to get out, whether it's $200 or $500 or $1,000. You and now I didn't get out because I was not awarded bail, because I kept driving over and over again. I already had quite a record. So I understood why I was not afforded bail. But so many other people, I wanted to bail them out so badly because they stay in jail for weeks and months and their life outside unravels. Did the person have an apartment? Gone. Did the person have a job? Gone. Did the person have Maine care? Gone. Not because they were convicted of anything, but because they were simply in jail. Did the person have children? Likely taken. This is all before convicted of anything. These are people who are in pre-trial status, presumed innocent in our country, convicted of nothing, and they can't get out of jail because they're poor and or ill, and their life unravels. I tell people the only thing jails do, and our system does well, consistently, is prepare people to go back to jail. And that's what happened with Chad. I'll end with this. That's what happened with Chad. I split up my time between Penobscot County Jail and Two Bridges Jail in Wiscasset. I was boarded out from Penobscot County because it's always overcrowded. And so Chad got out of jail with his paper on restitution, and I went off to Two Bridges. I came back to Penobscot County a little later, maybe a month later, 2 months later, I can't remember. Who was back in jail? Chad. Chad was back in jail. He generally stole, occasionally beer, oftentimes food. He was back in jail.
Doug, Terry has a question for you too. If you get a
Thank
minute.
you. Hi, Terry. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's thank you. It was thank you for coming in today and speaking. It was heartbreaking and eye-opening and yet really encouraging. I'm really happy to hear this opportunity is out there. I'm just curious, how is it, and you may have said this right up front and I missed it, but how is it funded?
Yeah, we applied for a grant from the federal government. So it's funded through the U.S. Department of Labor. All of the monies that fund the workforce development system in Maine and nationally are, the monies are from the federal government. So U.S. Department of Labor provides the money that we use for this initiative, Connecting with Opportunities, and our other programs. And ultimately the goal, of course, is employment for individuals. That's what the Department of Labor wants us to ultimately get people to, is decent employment. And again, for some people, it means a short-term education training program. Maybe somebody wants to go through a short-term commercial driver's license course, or maybe a longer program to be an electrician, or maybe someone wants to go to a 2-year program to become a substance use disorder treatment provider. But not everyone goes to school. Some people just want to go to work soon, but need a hand to do that. So we have both money and people to try to make that happen.
Oh,
thanks.
any other questions for Doug this morning?
Well, I appreciate the time very much. And again, if you remember nothing else, we have lots of money, and don't worry about whether you think someone's eligible. Point them in our direction. We would love to see if we can help them.
Well, Doug, thank you. On behalf of Farmington Rotary, thank you so much for joining us this morning and providing a very insightful view of the opportunities that people can have to help them. Thank you.
Yep. Well, I appreciate it, and help us spread the word. And I don't know if Karen we have a one-page flyer that we would love to share with you and have you send out to anyone that you know, frankly, because again, this isn't just for, for people who might have an issue with opioids. These programs really are for anyone you know. It might be someone in your home or your neighbor's home. So I'll make sure Karen has that, and if she hasn't already sent it out, I'm sure we'll get that to you. Thank you all.
Drop it in the chat too.
Thank you.
Great. Oh yes, thank you all. Take care now.